My name is Hilda. I'm 60 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will forever change how you see family. Just 3 days ago, my son Damien and his wife Melissa pushed my husband Henry and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay broken and bleeding, Henry whispered the only thing that could save us. "Hilda, don't move. Play dead." But the real horror wasn't the fall. It was the truth Henry revealed, one he had buried for 25 years. For decades, I thought we had the perfect family. Henry and I raised 2 sons, Richard, our firstborn, full of laughter and love, and Damien, quieter, more distant. Still, I loved them equally. Sundays were filled with church, family dinners, and dreams of grandchildren. We had no idea how fragile it all was. When Richard was 20, he suddenly began clashing with Damien. I'd catch them whispering angrily, falling silent when I entered. Then, one October night, Richard didn't come home. By dawn, they found his body at the bottom of the river gorge. The police called it an accident. I accepted that version because the alternative, that one of my sons killed the other, was unbearable. Damien was oddly calm at the funeral. While I cried until I had no tears, he just stood there, cold and detached. Afterward, he changed, acting loving and attentive. I thought it was grief, but in reality, he was hiding the monster he truly was. Years passed. Damien married Melissa, who called me Mom and seemed sweet. They had 2 children. He built his own carpentry business and, for a while, life felt whole again. But beneath that illusion was rot. 6 months ago, Henry and I decided to update our will. Between savings, the house, and my family land, we had about $200,000. Damien suggested it himself, smiling warmly while Melissa squeezed my hand. They insisted we make them sole heirs for convenience, promising to care for us and distribute the inheritance fairly. I hesitated, but Henry, always trusting, agreed. Against my gut instinct, I signed. After that, their visits changed. They no longer came for family dinners or laughter. They came to push us into selling the house, downsizing, and giving Damien power of attorney. "Mom, this house is too big for you," Melissa said sweetly, her eyes sharp with calculation. "What if you fall down the stairs?" Every word dripped with concern, but I felt the chill beneath it. Henry dismissed my worries, but I pressed him. "Don't you see how strange Damien's sudden interest is?" That's when Henry, with haunted eyes, confessed what he had never told me. The night Richard died, Damien wasn't studying in his room. Henry had followed him and found both boys at the gorge screaming at each other. Richard had discovered Damien had been stealing money from our family savings. He had proof and threatened to expose him. Damien exploded with rage. Henry saw him push Richard deliberately. Not an accident. Murder. Damien begged his father to cover it up, swearing it was self-defense, promising to repay the money. Henry, torn between grief and loyalty, believed him, or pretended to. He never told me because, as he said, Richard was already gone. I couldn't destroy what was left of our family. For 25 years, Henry had been Damien's accomplice in silence. And Damien kept stealing. His carpentry business, Henry revealed, was collapsing under $100,000 of debt. Melissa knew, too. Her constant questions about our assets were proof. Together, they had calculated exactly what our lives were worth. Then came the final plan. Damien called one evening, "Mom, Dad, for your 40th anniversary, let's take you to the mountains." A family hike, photos, a perfect day. Henry and I looked at each other in terror. It was an invitation to our execution. We agreed, pretending not to know. Henry prepared by hiding his phone, setting it to record everything. He also left a letter for my sister Harriet explaining the truth, in case we didn't survive. That Saturday, Damien and Melissa arrived cheerful, backpacks filled with safety gear. Melissa beamed with her new camera. Damien said, "The lookout views are spectacular." He meant, "They'll be the last you'll ever see." We hiked until Melissa pointed to a dangerous cliff. "Let's take photos there. The valley will look beautiful in the background." Henry squeezed my hand. The moment had come. At the edge, Melissa lifted her camera. "Smile," she said coldly. Damien stepped behind us. "One more picture, just move back a little." We knew it was over. Then Henry grabbed Damien's wrist. "If we die, you're coming with us," he roared. All four of us toppled, screaming, into the gorge. The impact shattered bones. Pain consumed me. I tasted blood, sure it was the end. But Henry whispered, "Play dead." Nearby, I heard Damien groaning, Melissa moaning about her broken leg. "And the old people?" she asked. "They're dead," Damien lied. "Perfect," Melissa whispered. It worked. I stayed frozen. They crawled away, planning their cover story, a tragic accident where they had tried to save us. But Henry and I were alive. Broken, bleeding, but alive, and now armed with the truth that could finally destroy them. At the bottom of the gorge, Henry and I whispered through our pain. He had broken ribs, my arm and shoulder throbbed like fire. But we were alive. Alive, and holding the secret that could finally expose Damien. "We can't stay here forever," I whispered. "No," Henry said, wincing. But his phone, it recorded everything. If we survive, we can prove what they planned. Minutes dragged on. Then we heard Damien and Melissa calling for help in the distance. Soon, the voices of rescuers echoed above, ropes clinking as they descended. Our children played their roles perfectly. "They fell," Melissa sobbed. "We tried to save them," Damien shouted. "Please hurry, my parents." His voice cracked with grief so convincing it made my stomach turn. When rescuers reached us, I kept still, pretending death. A paramedic whispered, "Pulse faint, but present." They strapped us to stretchers and lifted us out. From the corner of my half-open eyes, I saw Melissa watching, her face painted with fake sorrow. She believed we were as good as dead. The helicopter carried us to the hospital. I forced myself to remain unconscious. Nurses worked frantically. A young nurse named Inns leaned close, whispering, "If you're pretending, move your finger." I twitched once. Her eyes widened. "You're in danger, aren't you?" I moved 3 times. She gasped but quickly covered, promising to protect me. That night, Damien and Melissa entered our room. They thought we were unconscious. Damien leaned near my ear and whispered, "I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom. You shouldn't have asked so many questions about our finances." Some truths are better left buried, like Richard. The words stabbed my heart, but Inns heard everything. She left quietly and soon returned with the chief doctor and 2 police officers. "You're safe now," the doctor murmured. "These officers will protect you." I opened my eyes for the first time. Detective Johnson introduced himself. "We understand you're in danger. Tell us what really happened." In a hoarse whisper, I said the words I never imagined. My son and his wife pushed us. While I recounted everything, Richard's murder, the theft, the will, the mountain plan, Henry confirmed it all from his own hospital bed. Most important of all, he handed the detective his phone. On it was every word Damien and Melissa had spoken on the trail. Police listened for an hour. They heard Melissa confess about the plan, Damien admitting we were obstacles, and their rehearsed story about rock slipping. It was undeniable. Meanwhile, Damien and Melissa waited in the hospital lobby, crying on cue for strangers, playing grieving children. They didn't know the net was closing. "The recording is clear," Detective Johnson said at last. "It proves both Richard's murder and today's attempted murders. It's enough to arrest them." We watched through the window as officers cornered Damien and Melissa in the lobby. "Damien Black and Melissa Black, you are under arrest for the murder of Richard Black and the attempted murder of Hilda and Henry Black." Melissa screamed, "This is insane. We're the victims." Damien shouted, "Impossible." They were dead. We saw them die. His outburst was captured by police recorders, another confession. Then the alliance shattered. Melissa shrieked, "It was all his idea." "He forced me," Damien snapped. "You suggested the cliff. You planned everything." In minutes, they turned on each other, desperate to save themselves. Detective Johnson later told us something chilling. Damien had been secretly recording us too. In his backpack, they found a digital recorder with weeks of conversations. Melissa's voice was clear. We have to act fast before they go to the police. The mountain trip hadn't been spontaneous. It was a desperate, calculated move after they realized Henry and I suspected them. The detective revealed more. Damien's business wasn't just failing, he owed money to violent lenders. Without our inheritance, he'd likely be killed by them. Our deaths weren't only convenient, they were essential to his survival. But the betrayal ran even deeper. Damien had forged my signature on financial documents, stolen nearly $50,000 over 5 years. Every dollar Henry and I had saved through decades of sacrifice had fed his lies. As we processed this, my sister Harriet arrived. She wept when she saw us alive. "I always knew something was wrong after Richard's death," she said. But I never imagined this. I asked about Damien and Melissa's children. Harriet told me they'd been placed in temporary foster care, confused and asking for their parents. My heart broke. They were innocent victims of their parents' greed. Lawyer Albert, the same man who drafted our will, assured us the case was strong. With recordings, confessions, and financial evidence, conviction was almost certain. But he warned us, their defense will argue it was a crime of passion, not premeditation. They'll claim desperation drove them. Desperation? I snapped. They planned this for weeks, bought ropes and gear, rehearsed their lies. Albert nodded. That's why your testimony is crucial. Without it, they might win leniency. I knew then what I had to do, for Richard. For Henry. For our grandchildren. Weeks later, we returned home, our bodies healing but our hearts scarred. The house felt hollow, frozen in time, the day of the hike. Dishes in the sink, withered flowers from Damien on the table. Shadows of betrayal lingered in every corner. The trial began 6 months later. On the day I testified, I looked straight at Damien. His eyes were empty. No remorse, no son. Just a stranger I had raised in ignorance. I told the jury everything. The will, the lies, the mountain, the recording, the decades of theft. And then I looked directly at him. Damien, I don't know who you are anymore. My son died the night you killed Richard. What has lived in his place is a monster I failed to see. 3 days later, the jury returned guilty verdicts. First-degree murder for Richard, first-degree attempted murder for us. Melissa was convicted as an accomplice. Both sentenced to life in prison without parole. The nightmare was over, but the wounds remained. Henry and I began the process of adopting our grandchildren. They were innocent, blameless children who deserved love and safety. Every night, as I tucked them in, I told them stories of Richard the uncle they would never know, but who had been everything Damien was not: kind, honest, good. We were alive, and the truth was finally free. Life after the trial was not what movies promised. There were no neat endings, no tidy bows wrapped around tragedy. The reality of surviving your child's betrayal is that every breath feels borrowed, every memory contaminated. Yet Henry and I clung to one truth: we had survived. We had pulled the mask off the monsters living under our roof for decades, and we had lived to tell it. The media storm was relentless. Reporters called it the most horrifying family betrayal of the decade. Cameras camped outside the hospital, then our home. They wanted the sound bites, the broken mother, the betrayed father, the innocent grandchildren. What they didn't want was the silence. The nights when I jolted awake screaming Richard's name, or when Henry sat in the workshop staring at tools he no longer touched. We weren't just victims of Damien and Melissa. We were victims of our own blindness. For years, I had chosen to believe the image of a family we worked so hard to build. I had ignored the coldness in Damien's eyes, the way he recoiled from love, the flickers of resentment he couldn't hide. I told myself he was just different, quieter, misunderstood. But the truth is, he was already becoming the man who would steal from us, lie to us, and eventually try to kill us. That guilt gnawed at me, especially in the early weeks after the sentencing. I replayed every moment from Richard's death onward. What if I had questioned the accident harder? What if Henry had confessed the truth immediately instead of hiding it for 25 years? Could we have saved Richard? Could we have stopped Damien from becoming a murderer? But guilt is a heavy chain. If you let it, it drags you to the bottom of the same gorge Damien tried to push us into. Henry reminded me often. We can't change the past, Hilda. But we can change what happens to those children. Our grandchildren were our second chance. The court granted us temporary custody and later, permanent guardianship. Bringing them into our home was like filling the empty spaces with fragile light. At first, they were withdrawn, traumatized by whispers at school and the sudden absence of their parents. But children are resilient. Slowly, they began to laugh again. They drew pictures for us, asked for bedtime stories, and sometimes cried themselves to sleep with questions we couldn't answer. "Why can't Mommy come home?" the youngest asked one night. I swallowed the ache in my throat. "Because Mommy and Daddy made some very bad choices," I whispered, "but we love you and we're here for you always." Raising them was not easy. We were in our 60s, nursing broken bones and scarred souls, suddenly thrust into parenthood again. But each morning when I saw their faces, I felt Richard's presence. It was as though his goodness had been reborn in them, a reminder that even in betrayal, love could survive. Months passed, then a year. Damien and Melissa tried to appeal, their lawyers pushing for reduced sentences under claims of financial desperation. But the evidence was airtight. The recordings, the confessions, the forged signatures, every piece painted them not as desperate victims, but as predators who had hunted their own family. The appeals were denied. Still, their shadows lingered. Every knock at the door made me jump. Every unknown phone number felt like a threat. Trauma does that. It rewires you to expect danger in the ordinary. Henry said it best one evening as we rocked the children to sleep. "We may be safe, Hilda, but we'll never be the same." The truth is, we weren't. Our innocence had died with Richard. What remained was survival, resilience, and a determination to never let lies fester in silence again. Sometimes, late at night, I replay Damien's final words to me in the hospital. "Some truths are better left buried, just like Richard. He had meant it as a threat. But I've come to see it differently. Truth may bury relationships, reputations, even illusions of family. But it also sets you free. By exposing Damien and Melissa, we buried the lies that had poisoned us for decades. We ended their cycle of deceit before it claimed us, and before it could corrupt the grandchildren we now raise as our own. That is the truth we chose to live by. Now, 1 year later, I often sit on our porch with Henry. The same porch where we once planned to travel, to grow old together, to watch grandchildren play. The dreams are smaller now, but somehow deeper. We don't dream of beaches or houses anymore. We dream of giving these children a life built on honesty and love. We dream of peace. The grandchildren play in the yard, their laughter cutting through the heavy air like sunlight. They are proof that love doesn't die, even when betrayal tries to choke it. They ask about Richard often. I tell them stories, how he loved to help in the workshop, how he dreamed of becoming an engineer, how he was kind to everyone he met. I never tell them how he died, only how he lived, because that is the legacy I want them to carry. Not the darkness of Damien and Melissa, but the light of Richard. Some nights I still hear the echo of the gorge, the wind whipping past as we fell, the crack of bones, the taste of blood. But then I hear Henry's whisper, "Play dead," and I realize it wasn't just a command to survive the fall, it was a command to outlive the lies. To endure until truth could finally breathe. And we did. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this: trust your instincts. Ask the questions, even if the answers scare you. Don't bury suspicions because you're afraid of what they might reveal. Secrets left to rot will destroy families from the inside out. Truth hurts, but lies kill. I lost one son to murder, another to his own greed, and nearly lost my husband and my life. But in the ashes of that betrayal, I found something stronger: the will to live, the courage to speak, and the chance to protect the innocent. My name is Hilda. I'm 60 years old, and though my story is drenched in tragedy, it's also a warning, a testimony, and a plea. If you've ever felt the ground shift beneath your family's smiles, if you've ever sensed danger behind someone's words, listen to that voice. Don't wait until you're standing at the edge of the cliff. Because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will push you first. And if you want to hear more true stories like mine, stories that reveal just how dark family secrets can get, make sure you subscribe, follow, and never miss the next one.